Hello everyone, Team Player Gaming here, and today I've got another playtest video for you. I covered the Psychic, so now it's time to cover the Thamaturge. A lot of people, myself included, are really excited about this. Unfortunately, I'm going to be doing this in a different way than I did on the Psychic, because that video didn't turn out as well as I would like. But let's get into it. So the first thing I see on this is that they are charisma based, just like the devs said they'd be, and they get 8 plus their con modifier for HP. It's actually pretty interesting that a non-spellcasting class goes off charisma. That's a first. Then we get into initial proficiencies. Thaumaturges are expert in perception, and they're trained in fortitude and reflex saves, and expert in will saves. Just like the psychic on saves. It looks like they are trained in arcana, nature, occultism, and religion from the start. It's not based on subclass. And they get 2 plus intelligence modifier other skills. That makes sense since they get so many specific skills. Alright, looks like they're trained in simple weapons, martial weapons, and unarmed attacks. Oh, and they're trained in light armor, medium armor, and unarmored defense. And finally, they do get a class DC. Now, let's take a look at all the class features. So it looks like they get the dubious knowledge feat automatically, and if they already have it, then they gain additional lore. So even if they fail on recall knowledge, they still get some true information. So far, this is definitely a knowledge-based class. So now let's look at these key terms. First up, we have the esoteric traits. It looks like feats and class features can have this trait. These are the ones that are based off your implements. You have to have your implements on you to use these, which makes sense. Normally you're assumed to have them, but sometimes, depending on the situation, you might not. Then we have the temporary items. Apparently, thaumaturges can make temporary items like alchemists can. We'll have to see what these items are, but sounds like it could be cool. It looks like the esoteric class feature gives you a couple of actions. First up, we have Find Flaws, which you can use once per round. So you can recall knowledge about a creature, but you use your charisma modifier instead of the normal ability modifier. This means that thaumaturges don't have to take intelligence or wisdom to be good at recall knowledge. That's awesome. The creature must either be one that you can see or one that you've specifically investigated in advance during exploration. And it looks like you get the original effects of recall knowledge and additional effects when you use this. So on a critical success, you learn all the creature's resistance, weaknesses, and immunities. If you would have learned any of them from recall knowledge already, you learn different ones. Then apparently you can use esoteric antithesis without spending an additional action. On a success, you learn the creature's highest weakness, if any. If you would have already learned it from recall knowledge, you gain additional information instead. You can then use esoteric antithesis without spending an additional action. On a failure, it looks like you can only use esoteric antithesis as your next action. And on a critical failure, you become flat-footed until the beginning of your next turn, and you can't use esoteric antithesis this round. Before I get into what I think of that, we should talk about esoteric antithesis. So it looks like you can only use this action when Find Flaws allows you to. So apparently you can use this interact action to make your unarmed attacks and weapon strikes against the creature magical if they weren't already, and you can choose to apply them to one creature's weakness even if they don't deal the correct type of damage. If the creature has a weakness value of 2 plus half your level or higher, you get to set the weakness to the creature's highest weakness. If the creature in question doesn't have a high enough weakness, you create a custom weakness with a value equal to 2 plus half your level, which only applies to your strikes. And you get this effect until you use Find Flaws again. So these two definitely make recall knowledge worth it. Definitely. Let's face it, most of the time you're going to at least succeed on recall knowledge. Especially since you can use your charisma instead of your intelligence or wisdom on the recall knowledge check. And it makes sense that you can only use esoteric antithesis when Find Flaws allows you to. I mean, you gotta know the enemy's weaknesses before you can take advantage of them. And then we come to how the implements actually work. It looks like there's a bunch of implements you can choose from, and you begin with a mundane object of that type. Then you gain the initial benefit for that implement, and eventually you can have up to 3. You can also unlock additional benefits for one or more of them. We'll have to see what the implements are like. Then there's implement empowerment. Apparently when you strike with your implement, you deal 2 extra damage. Apparently there's something called trace the patterns, but you can't make this strike with an implement you're using for that. It seems like this is also a special version of weapon specialization, in fact a better one, because you get 4 damage at 3rd level, 6 damage at 11th level, and 8 damage at 19th level. Then of course we have all the usual stuff. At 3rd level you get Great Fortitude, which is expert in fortitude saves. At 3rd level you get your 2nd implement, and you also get expert in weapons. At 7th level, Implement Adept allows you to pick an implement and gain its Adept effect. This also allows you to switch between implements as a free action. So if you have an implement you want to use but it's not in your hand, you can quickly grab it before using the action that implement has. This is really cool because it allows you to use it during the enemy's turn. Again, we'll have to see what the implements do later on in the book, but could be interesting. Also at 7th level, you get Master and Will saves and auto crit successes on successes with Will saves. You also get Weapon Specialization, which is pretty much the same as it's always been. It seems to me like high level Thamaturges will be able to do a lot of extra damage. That's pretty cool. Not great for teamwork because it just does extra damage, but still. At 9th level, your reflex saves go to experts. Thaumaturge class DC also goes up to experts. And you gain an additional skill increase, but you can only apply it to Arcana, Nature, Occultism, or Religion. At 11th level, your armor proficiency goes up to expert, and your proficiency in Perception goes up to Master. At 13th level, Greater Resolve is just Greater Juggernaut, but for will saves. You also get Master and Weapons at 13th level. At 15th level, you get Greater Weapon Specialization, which is pretty much the same as it's always been. And you get your 3rd implement. Implement Mastery at level 17 allows you to choose one implement and gain the next benefit up the line for it. So if you choose your 1st implement, then you gain the Paragon benefit, but if you choose something else, then you get the Adept benefit. Also at 17th level, you become a Master in Class DC, and you gain another additional skill increase, but again, can only be applied to Arcana, Nature, Occultism, or Religion. At 19th, you gain Master Proficiency in Armor. It looks like also at 19th, you can use Find Flaws as a free action rather than a single action, but you can still only use it once around. Alright, so here are the specifics on the implements. So the first one we've got is the Amulet, which seems to be about protecting people. As an initiate benefit, you get the Amulet's Ambiance reaction. So the trigger for this reaction is the subject of your esoteric antithesis would damage you or an ally within 15 feet of you. You have to be holding your amulet implement and benefiting from esoteric antithesis to use this. And it looks like it gives you the same resistance to the attack as the champion would. I'm starting to see why people wanted to use Thaumaturges as tanks. The Adept benefit seems to give you one type of damage resistance to a type of damage that was resisted by the reaction. The Paragon benefit seems to allow you to give your resistance to all allies within 15 feet, not just one. This particular reaction is better than the ones that the champion has access to, but I'm still not convinced that this is better than the champion when it comes to protection. The Chalice implement seems to be about healing. The initiate benefit is Drink from the Chalice, which requires an action. You can use it once per round, and you have to be holding your chalice. It looks like either you or an ally can drink from the chalice when you use this action. The target can either just sip from it or just down it. Sipping it seems to give you temporary hit points. Draining it, though, seems to actually heal you by 3 per level. But once you drain it, you can't drain it again until 10 minutes have passed without anybody drinking from it. But during this time, you can still sip from it. For the Paragon benefit for the Chalice, if you take slashing or piercing damage from a crit, or take persistent bleed damage, then on your next turn, the Chalice heals more. So if you sip from it, then it increases to your Charisma modifier plus your level on the temporary hit points. And the actual healing increases to 4 plus your level. Finally, the Paragon benefit seems to reduce conditions whenever you completely down the chalice. It also attempts to counteract poisons, diseases, and curses affecting the drinker. This isn't near as much healing as a cleric or a druid can do, but it's still pretty good. Alright, so it looks like the lantern implement is about revealing illusions for what they are. The initiate benefit of this one is kind of complicated, but basically it allows you to use your lantern to see farther and give you a bonus on certain skills like perception and recall knowledge against things that are in the area of your light. It also allows you to find hidden things like traps, secret doors, hazards, that sort of thing, without actually searching. The adept benefit seems to allow you to see invisible and ethereal creatures within the 20-foot area. They are still concealed though. With just this ability, you can't actually affect any ethereal creatures, but at least you know they're there. So for your lantern's Paragon effect, it looks like that while you're holding your lantern, and it's lit obviously, your GM can roll a secret check to counteract any illusion or transmutation effect within 20 feet, as long as it comes into the light. But even if you succeed, you don't actually end the spell. It's just to determine whether you and allies can see through it. This one appears to be more of a out of combat one. If your GM is throwing a lot of illusions at you, then this may be an implement to pick up, because you do get 3 of these. Alright, we got 2 implements left, the wand and the weapon. Obviously the wand implement is all about magic. When you choose this implement, you choose electricity, cold, or fire, and gain the fling magic activity. For 2 actions, if you're holding your wand, you can deal 1d4 plus your charisma modifier damage to the target of a type that you chose for this implement, with a basic reflex save. The target must be within 80 feet. At 3rd level and every 2 levels after, the damage increases by 1d4. When you gain the adept benefit, it looks like the range increases to 120 feet and you get a second element. And you can select between the 2. Also, fling magic seems to have an additional effect if the target fails its save and takes damage, depending on the type of damage you deal. For fire, the target catches on fire, dealing 1d10 persistent fire damage. For cold, they take a minus 10-foot status penalty to speed. And for electricity, the target becomes flat-footed until the start of your next turn. The Paragon benefit increases the range on fling magic to 180 feet, allows you to choose between all 3 damage types, and you can choose to target a single creature or to affect all creatures in a 10-foot burst. Okay, I am looking at the wand as another excellent teamwork option. The adept benefit alone makes it good. I don't even think you need the Paragon benefit of this one, although it is unclear as to whether the adept benefit applies to all creatures in a 10-foot burst or not from the Paragon benefit. But all the effects of the adept benefit are really good for teamwork, especially cold and electricity. I really don't think you're going to need a 180-foot range on this. 120 feet is plenty. It's also unclear as to how long the minus 10-foot penalty to speed lasts for cold, but overall, wand is an excellent implement for teamwork. Now we come to the last implement in the playtest, and that's the weapon. For the initiate benefit, it looks like you gain the implement's interruption reaction, and at 5th level you gain the weapon's critical specialization effect. It looks like Implement's Interruption is basically attack of opportunity against the subject of your esoteric antithesis. For the Adept benefit, it looks like when you use your Implement's Interruption and fail, but not critically fail, they take 1 point of damage plus the weakness. And the Paragon benefit seems to allow you to disrupt the triggering action on a regular hit with Implement's Interruption, instead of just on a crit. I don't know if I really like this one. You can't really use the reaction you gain from this unless you use Esoteric Antithesis again, which means using Find Flaws again, which takes an action. So yeah, not as good as the fighter's attack of opportunity, but pretty good. Feat time. The first one we have is Binding Oath. This feat has a whole bunch of text that really boils down to this. For one action, you can make an oath with people. one that you must try to keep. You gain a +1 bonus to make requests of and coerce creatures that are aware of the oath you made, as long as you invoke those activities based on the oath you made, simply because those creatures know that you have to keep the promise. If you are an expert in arcana, nature, occultism, or religion, you can do this twice a day. If you're a master in one of those skills, 3 times. And if you're legendary in one of those skills, as many times as you like. This is really more of a roleplay feat. I really can't see it being used in combat, which makes it weird that it costs 1 action to use. I mean, the bonus from this is only going to apply against NPCs. Yeah, I don't really like this feat. Next is Divine Disharmony. Basically, for 1 action, you pull out 2 opposing divine objects, like the religious symbols of 2 deities that are hated enemies, and combine them together. At this point, you get to roll your choice of Deception or Intimidation against the will DC of a creature that you can see within 60 feet. If the creature can cast divine spells, you gain a +2 bonus on the check. The GM might determine that a creature that despises all deities might be unaffected. On a critical success, the creature is flat-footed to your attacks until the end of your next turn. On a success, the creature is flat-footed against your attacks until the end of your current turn. So far, really not liking the Thamaturge feats. Both of them so far don't seem to have any teamwork potential. But moving on. Okay, so it looks like esoteric lore is just bardic lore for thaumaturges. Next is, thaumaturges can get familiars. That's cool. There are some pretty cool things that familiars can do, so that's good. They get them. Next up we have Haunt Cunning, which seems to be just the rogues find traps, but for haunts. But if you have the Lantern implement, then you gain a bonus on stuff haunts can do. Neat. Alright, now we have a Root to Life, which you seem to be able to use 1 or 2 actions on. This feat allows you to place some symbol of life next to a dying creature, and immediately stabilize them. That seems to be the 1 action version. When you use 2 actions on it, you can attempt flat checks to remove each source of persistent damage affecting the target. And the DC is 10 instead of 15. This right here is the first teamwork option I've seen for Thaumaturge. It's okay. The last first level feat that I see in the playtest is Scroll Thaumaturgy. It looks like this feat allows you to use scrolls of any magic tradition using your Thaumaturge class DC instead of the normal spell DC. And of course, if the spell is in multiple traditions, you choose which tradition when you activate the scroll. This right here is the first level feat I'm taking for my teamwork belt. Taking this feat means you can activate any scroll that the party happens to pick up. And there are a ton of good teamwork spells in the game. If you have a good GM that's giving you a lot of scrolls, this feat can be amazing. Yes, scrolls are a once and done thing, but it's still a good feat. Moving on to second level feats, we have Call Implement. This is just a way to get your implement back if you leave it behind somewhere. Or if it gets disarmed or something. Not great. Enhanced Familiar is the same as it's always been. Pick up 4 abilities instead of 2. Next we have Esoteric Warden. With this feat, when you find flaws and succeed on Recall Knowledge, in addition to the normal effects, you gain a +1 bonus to your AC against the creature's next attack, and a +1 on your next saving throw against the creature. If you get a critical success, it's +2. And it looks like you can only gain the bonuses once per day against a particular creature. Again, that only affects you, so it's not a great teamwork option. What this feat does is give you even more of a reason to recall knowledge with this class. The last second level feat in the playtest is Talisman Esoterica. This feat allows you to make talismans. During your daily preparations, you can make 2 talismans with an item level no higher than half your level. You need to know each talisman's formula though. If you create a talisman in this way, it's a temporary item and loses its magic the next time you make daily preparations, even if it isn't used. You do know the formulas for every common talisman in the core rulebook of your level or lower. But you don't need a formula book for them because you remember them through oral traditions. This feat can be really good for teamwork early game, but it gets less and less useful as time goes on. At high levels, you're probably going to want to retrain this to something else. For 4th level feats, we have Draw Warding Circle. Again, a lot of text that really boils down to this. You have to be benefiting from esoteric antithesis to use this feat. Basically, you create a 10-foot burst circle that traps a creature. Any creature other than the creature in question can enter the circle with no problem. The creature you're trapping, however, must make a will save against your class DC to exit it. You must spend 1 minute drawing the circle for it to be effective. The circle remains in effect until you either draw another circle or you use Find Flaws on another creature. Okay, then there's Pact of Fey Glamour. Again, a feat with a lot of text, but boils down to this. You make a pact with Fey. During this pact, you must accept any Fey's request for hospitality, granting them food, drink, and lodging for up to 3 days and 3 nights. You also promise not to harm any creature to whom you've offered hospitality or has shown hospitality to you, whether or not that creature is Fey, unless that creature does harm first. But what do you get from this pact? Well, your base appearance changes indefinitely to any one appearance you wish that is within the bounds of possibility for your ancestry. This effect cannot be countered or removed except by violating the pact. You can also cast Illusory Disguise once per day as a primal innate spell using your class DC rather than spell DC. Refusing hospitality to a Fey or violating hospitality causes you to lose this feat until you atone for your transgression, which instantly reverts your appearance back to the one you had before you made the pact. This is really more of an out-of-combat feat, so I'm not going to cover too much about it, because this channel is about feats that make combat more interesting. One more activation allows you to activate an item you've invested even after you've used that activation the maximum number of times for its frequency. But you can only do it on items that are half your level or lower. The item in question must have a frequency of once per day or more, and you can't have already used the activation this round. This could be really good for teamwork items. It really doesn't have a downside, so yeah, this is really good. I might just take this one for my 4th level feat. Rituals aren't used very often, so Thamaturgic Ritualist isn't that good of a feat. You gain a +2 circumstance bonus on all primary checks to perform a ritual. You also learn 2 uncommon rituals with a level no higher than half your level. In order to learn a ritual, you need to have all the prerequisites for it. At 8th level and every 4 levels after, you learn another uncommon ritual with the same prerequisites. You can cast these rituals as the primary caster, but you can't teach them to anyone else or allow someone else to serve as the primary caster unless they know the ritual as well. Rituals aren't used very often for that exact reason. So this feat isn't good. Alright, last 4th level feat. Turn Away Misfortune. This feat is a reaction that lets you cancel out misfortune's effects on rolls. Not entirely sure whether it gets rid of the misfortune effect permanently, or whether it just applies to that one roll. Either way, not that great of a feat. Time to talk about 6th level feats now. The first one is Handy Esoterica. With this feat, it looks like you gain the Prescient Planner and the Prescient Consumable feats. Okay, this is really cool. It looks like you can use Prescient Planner for 2 actions, rather than taking a minute with this feat. That means it's actually useful during combat. Both the feats you gain for this feat are. I can see myself using this feat to pull out an Alchemist Bomb and handing it to an ally, so they can take advantage of weaknesses too. We'll have to see what the other 6th level feats do, but I might take this. Next we have Scroll Esoterica. It looks like this one has Scroll Thaumaturgy as a prerequisite. So this feat lets you create a temporary scroll containing a 1st level spell of any tradition. Apparently it lasts until your next daily preparations if you haven't already used it. Ugh, that sucks. It can't be used to learn a spell. I can see why that is, but still. And at 8th level, you can add a 2nd scroll containing a 2nd level spell. I don't know, I don't think this feat is worth it unless there's another feat that lets you do higher level spells. I mean, a 1st level spell scroll can be good, even a 2nd level one can, but I feel like this would be better if you could, get scrolls of 4th level spells or something. Alright, the last 6th level feat is Rule of 3, which takes an action. You can use this feat once around. You have to be benefiting from esoteric antithesis, you have to be able to see the subject, and you can't have used find flaws this round. You also must be able to speak your intent to the world and call out the subject of your esoteric antithesis. But the subject doesn't need to understand or even hear you for Rule of 3 to take effect. And the benefits depend on how many times you've used it. The first time, there's no benefit. But if you've used find flaws in the presence of that creature, that counts as the first time you've used it. The second time, you gain a +1 status bonus to attack rolls against that creature, okay. And the third time, the bonus increases to +2, and the creature becomes flat-footed to your attacks. This feat could be good for teamwork if you use it on, like, trips or shoves or something. But Handy Esoterica seems to be the best feat here. For 8th level feats, let's start with Elaborate Talisman Esoterica. You need to have Talisman Esoterica to take this, okay. So this just gives you 4 temporary talismans each day instead of 2. I really don't see this feat being useful unless they come out with better talismans in Dark Archive. Incredible Familiar. Okay, this is a new one. Requires Enhanced Familiar. Okay, this is really good. You can select 6 familiar abilities each day instead of 4. There are definitely some really good teamwork options that familiars can take, but most of them actually aren't that good for teamwork, so I don't think I'm taking this one either. Alright, last 8th level feat is Know It All. When you succeed at a knowledge check, you gain additional information or context. And if you critically succeed, you gain even more additional information than context at normal. At the GM's discretion, of course. Okay, this one I think I might be taking. This is clearly a knowledge-based class, and getting additional information, even if it's not on a creature, sounds amazing. This is definitely more of an out-of-combat feat, though. Oh, looks like there's a couple more 8th level feats, sorry. Looks like we have another pact next. Pact of Infernal Prowess. You've made a pact with a devil. Once per day, when you critically fail a check, you can reroll the check as a free action. This is a fortune effect. Additionally, you can choose to automatically succeed at checks to earn income for tasks below your level, without even rolling. However, when you die, your soul is consigned to hell. You can't be returned to life except by powerful magic such as Miracle. And even then, the devil responsible for the contract can track your every move for 1 year. It gains the effects of the Discern Location spell, and it can use 10th level scrying on you at will, and you automatically critically fail your saving throw. Oh, looks like you gotta be careful with this feat. Yeah, once you take it, you're stuck with it until you journey to hell and destroy the devil's written contract. The re-rolling can be used on anything, which is awesome. Which means you can use it on checks that have to do with teamwork. Also, the earn income thing is really cool. I could see this being used for more money so you can craft things. But if you take this feat, you have to be really careful not to die. Especially when you first take this feat. But I would think it'd be hard for you to die, because you would be able to reroll death saves if you crit fail, so yeah, there's that. But overall, pretty good feat. And now we come to the actual last feat for 8th level. Sympathetic Weakness. Basically how this feat works is when you use Esoteric Antithesis on a creature that already has a weakness, then you can apply that weakness to other creatures with the similar one. But you don't get any other effects of Esoteric Antithesis, and if you create a custom weakness, this feat does nothing. Overall, pretty good feat, but I still think Know It All is the best 8th level feat for teamwork. For 10th level, it looks like we have Share Antithesis. Oh, is that like Share Rage? Let's see here. The requirement is your Esoteric Antithesis is set to weakness its subject has, but not a custom weakness. Okay, interesting. It is like Shared Rage. Yeah, you give your Esoteric Antithesis to an adjacent ally. You can't use it for custom weaknesses, only a weakness that the enemy already has. But this is still a very good teamwork option. We'll see what the other 10th level feats do, but this might be the best one. Thamaturge's Investiture just lets you invest in more items. I actually find that most of the time, investing in 12 items is plenty, but this one lets you go all the way up to 20 if you have Charisma 24. I mean, how many invested items are you actually going to need? Alright, the last 10th level feat for Thamaturges in the playtest is Twin Weakness. Looks like to use this feat, you have to be holding an implement and a weapon, and the subject of your esoteric antithesis has to be in reach of both. You make a strike against the subject of your esoteric antithesis. On any attack roll result but a critical failure, you press your implement against the creature. So basically, if you hit, you deal the weapon damage plus double the weakness from esoteric antithesis. And if you miss, you still get the weakness damage from esoteric antithesis. And it counts as 2 attacks for multiple attack penalty. Everybody's going to want to take this feat at 10th level, but personally, I'd rather take Share Antithesis. It's a much better teamwork option and makes combat way more interesting. And easier. Moving on to 12th level feats, we have Elaborate Scroll Esoterica. Oh, is this the better version of Scroll Esoterica? It does require it, so must be. Okay, so this lets you go all the way up to 5th level spells with Scroll Esoterica. Granted, that's all the way up at 16th level, but it's still pretty good. Yeah, this makes Scroll Esoterica worth it. Now I'm kinda unsure as to what feat I should take at 6th level. Looks like next is another Pact. Pact of the Final Breath. I'm not sure how they can top the last one, but let's see. Okay, yeah, these pacts are the longest text feats I've ever seen. But this one boils down to this. Essentially, you live twice as long as you normally would, and the first time each day that you would be reduced to 0 hit points and gain the dying condition, you can instead regain a number of hit points equal to your level, and remain conscious. You also gain fast healing equal to half your level for 3 rounds. In exchange for this, you swear to treat the dead you come across with respect, performing last rites and final dispositions to ensure their spirits rest in peace and are less likely to become undead. You also swear to destroy undead you come across as long as it's within your power to do so without inordinate risk to yourself. Violating this pact basically causes the protections to end, and if you've already lived past your normal lifespan, then yeah, you basically instantly die. I could totally see an Orc Thaumaturge taking this feat and just be like, hey enemies, come and get me! Good luck taking me down! Quick Circle just lets you create a warning circle as 3 actions instead of taking a minute. Alright, last 12th level feat is Thaumaturge's Demesne. Really hope I'm pronouncing that right. With this feat, you select a 200-foot area that you own. So if it's a building or property, you must own it, and if it's unowned, then no other inhabitants can contest your claim to it. Once you've chosen it, it automatically becomes an arcane private sanctum as the spell, with an unlimited duration. This spell is heightened to half your level rounded up, and uses your Thaumaturge class DC in place of spell DC if appropriate. It is also attended by 3 unseen custodians, as called by an unseen custodian ritual. One object in the area also gains an elemental sentinel as the elemental sentinel ritual. This is just a better version of Private Sanctum. In fact, this almost feels like a magnificent mansion. Almost. But it's not as good as that. But this is an excellent way to set up a headquarters. And protect certain items that you need to. Esoteric Reflexes requires an implement that grants a reaction. So either the amulet or the weapon. Okay, this feat just gives you an extra reaction, but you can only use it for reactions granted by your implement. This could be really good for teamwork with the amulet implement. Then we get to Grand Talisman Esoterica. Hope this is better than Elaborate Talisman Esoterica. Not really. I mean, it just gives you 6 temporary talismans instead of 4. Actually, now that I'm looking at some of these talismans, they're actually pretty good. Some of these talismans actually allow you to do things that you normally wouldn't be able to. And the feats say nothing about not being able to give them to allies. Okay, this line of feats is actually better than I thought it was. Last feat for 14th level is Shared Warding. Whenever you use Esoteric Warden, you can choose to grant the same benefit to all allies within 30 feet. Okay, this is probably the best teamwork option for 14th level. Definitely. This is just a better version of Forbidding Ward, really. I mean, it's only for 1 round, but still really good. Now we come to 16th level feats and Implausible Esoterica. Okay, this one requires Handy Esoterica. You can use Prescient Planner even if you've already used it after purchasing goods, and it takes a single action now instead of a 2-action activity. And you can draw the item as part of that. Also, 5 times per day, you can use Prescient Planner to pull out a common consumable item of a level up to 6 levels lower than your level. This right here is insane. Normally, with Prescient Consumable, you can only pull out an item that's half your level or lower. But when you take this feat at 16th level, you can actually pull out a 10th level item instead of the normal 8th level item. And at 20th level, you can pull out a 14th level item rather than a 10th level item. This means that once you hit 17th level, you can start handing out greater bombs and greater mutagens without even being an alchemist. You wouldn't normally be able to get those even at 20th level. And that's just one example of what you could do with this feat. This is a great teamwork option. Next we have Implements Flight. Oh, is this going to allow you to fly with your implements? Yep. As long as you're holding your implement, you gain a fly speed equal to your speed. Alright, time for Sever Magic. You have to be holding your implement in one hand to be able to use this feat. Okay. You make a strike against an enemy, and if you hit and deal damage, you attempt to counteract a single spell on the target, and it seems to work as normal for counteracting spells. I wish this feat was lower level. Counteracting spells is one of those great teamwork options that nobody thinks about. And for a non-spellcasting class to be able to do it, yeah, that's pretty amazing. I mean, if you're going up against a spellcaster, this can be great. It does take 2 actions to do this, which is why I wish it was a lower level feat. Lastly, for 16th level, we have Trespass Teleportation, which is a reaction with the trigger. The subject of your esoteric antithesis uses a teleportation effect and is within 120 feet. And you have to be benefiting from esoteric antithesis, of course. You teleport along with the foe, appearing the same direction and distance from it as you were before it teleported away. This feat would be good, except for one problem. You're teleporting away from your party at that point, which is something you never want to do. Unless your foe is teleporting around the battlefield and not that far, this feat is kind of useless. The first 18th level feat is Grand Scroll Esoterica, which requires Elaborate Scroll Esoterica. This is going to give you even more scrolls, isn't it? Absolutely it does. Add a single scroll with a 6th level spell, and at 20th level add a scroll with a 7th level spell. That entire line is great if you pick the right spells. Implements Assault requires 3 actions, and you must be holding your implement and a weapon. This feat essentially allows you to hit every enemy within 30 feet of you, even if you're using a melee weapon. If you are using a melee weapon, it basically has returning. But you can't use this feat if you're using a weapon that you have to reload. This is just a way to do damage to multiple enemies, even with a melee weapon. It's okay. It's not great. Okay, then we have Intense Implement. Okay, that just gives you the Adept benefit for an implement that you only have the Initiate benefit for. Pretty basic. Okay, now we're on the home stretch with 20th level feats. First is Ubiquitous Antithesis. This feat requires Shared Antithesis. Is this a better version of Shared Antithesis? I hope so. Okay, this is the one that lets you use Shared Antithesis on everyone within 30 feet. This is actually better than Contagious Rage because you hit all allies within 30 feet at once rather than having to spend multiple actions on multiple turns on it. But it doesn't work on allies that you just met. Most of the time that means no NPCs. Unlimited Demesne requires the Thamaturge's Demesne feats to take. This feat basically allows you to move around your Demesne with all the benefits of the original feat, plus the benefits of Resplendent Mansion. And of course, you still have to follow all the restrictions of the original feats. You wouldn't believe how much Resplendent Mansion has helped us in my current campaign that I'm playing a rogue in. And this is just a better version of that, with some restrictions. Time for the last feat in the playtest. Wonder Worker. You have to be legendary in Arcana, Nature, Occultism, or Religion. Basically, with this feat, you can cast a spell of 8th level or lower that takes 1, 2, or 3 actions to cast once a day. You can choose any spell of any tradition as long as you are legendary in the associated skill. So Arcana for the Arcane list, Nature for the Primal list, occultism for the occult list, and religion for the divine list. And of course you use your class DC instead of spell DC. This feat is amazing. I can imagine playing a Thamaturge that's legendary in all of them and just being able to cast any spell of 8th level or lower once a day. That would be epic. Well, almost any spell. You wouldn't be able to cast the ones that you can spend 2 full rounds on, but still an excellent feat. Everybody's going to want to take this, just because of how versatile it is. The only question I have is, can you use the heightened versions of the spells as long as they're 8th level or lower? Okay, so what do I think? Overall, this is kind of what I expected. We got more information on the Thaumaturge than we did on the Psychic during Gen Con, so if it seems like I'm not as excited, that's why. I can see some of the reason why people think that this would be a good tank, but I still think the champion is better at it. Yes, the reaction for the amulet is better, and so are the protection feats. But I have some reasons why the champion is still better. Number 1, the champion gets legendary in all armor and heavy armor. That means the champion's AC is always going to be higher. And the more AC you have, the better you can protect your allies. The second reason is that a lot of times the Thaumaturge needs a free hand, which means no shield. Also, as it stands right now, the Thaumaturge has too many feats that are based off the weakness thing. The champion is much more built for defense. When I build a Thaumaturge, I'll be building it toward knowledge and weaknesses. That's the way the Thaumaturge is built toward teamwork. And that's going to wrap up this video. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more Pathfinder 2nd Edition teamwork content. You can also check out my Facebook and my Twitter. But if you really want to support me, you can pledge to me on Patreon. Links are in the description. So until next time, remember, teamwork is vital.